5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Live from the UnchainedTV headquarters in Los Angeles, California, this is Truth Files with Jane Velez-Mitchell. Get in touch during the show on socials. And make sure you don't miss any of UnchainedTV's award-winning programs by downloading the app for your phone, tablet, or smart TV. And now with the headlines, it's Jane Velez-Mitchell.
Welcome to Truth Files with me, Jane Velez-Mitchell. We are live across social media and our streaming network. Hope that you join us, share out, and participate in this extraordinary conversation with two amazing leaders with voices for Dharma Voices for Animals. I'm learning the Buddhism, Dharma Voices for Animals. And it's an extraordinary organization that's basically teaching people who are Buddhists or who are interested in Buddhism about the Buddhist principles and why, if you're Buddhist, guess what? You should not eat animals.
2,500 years ago, a man sat under a Bodhi tree, determined not to budge until he saw all there was to see. Upon arising, now enlightened, the Buddha spent the next 45 years teaching a new and revolutionary way of seeing the world. The essence of his teachings, called the Dharma, was articulated in the Four Noble Truths, where he taught the path to the end of all suffering. Central to these teachings was an important notion that the Dharma is not just about humans. Rather, it includes all of the beings who share the earth.
Andrea Diaz, as executive director of this organization, tell us what your fundamental message is.
Absolutely. So Dharma Voices for Animals is the only global Buddhist animal advocacy group in the world. And our mission is, just like you said, to bridge the gap between Buddhist teachings and compassionate living. We really want to empower Buddhists to align their actions with the beliefs that we uphold as Buddhists.
And this is so fascinating to me because I have to say, looking into this, I was very perplexed as to why you would even need to do this, that it seems to me pretty obvious, even from a cursory glance at the Buddhist teachings, that if you're Buddhist, you shouldn't eat animals. And this incredible film that you have that you produced, Animals and the Buddha, makes it absolutely 100% clear over and over again.
When people are introduced to the Dharma, one of the first things they're taught is the first precept: cause no harm. And they're taught that this principle of non-harm extends not just to humans, but to all beings.
Unlike in Western culture, where animals are kind of considered a separate, almost a separate form of life, and humans are considered very, very different, in Buddhism, we're all considered to be just a part of nature. And that we all have the same, we could say 5 aggregates. We're all made up of the same kinds of stuff. So there's not a hard and fast dividing line between humans on the one hand and the creatures on the other. That's why the first ethical precept in the Buddhist teachings is not to take the life of any living being.
So, Forrest, tell us about your teachings and how you try to connect the dots with people who are interested in Buddhism and actual Buddhists for something that is so basic and fundamental in this philosophy.
Yeah, that is a great question, Jane. Thank you so much for having us on. I'm really grateful to be here representing Dharma Voices for Animals. And I've been on this path for about 20 years in different Buddhist schools and different Buddhist centers. And it's a conversation that I've been involved with. I've been vegan for 17 years. So during that 17 years, got into some bizarre conversations. You know, the teachings of the Buddha are so clear and so simple. I think in the US, we have our Western, kind of pull yourself up by the bootstraps. Everyone's raised as a carnist here. And there are ways that Buddhists find to poke holes in the simplicity and the clarity of the Buddha's words and say, well, this or well, that, and come up with different justifications. So with DVA, what we're trying to do is to raise awareness and just tie this also into the environmental component, tie it into the ethical teachings of the Buddha, but also tie it into the environmental component. So we have a project called the Sustainable Sangha Project, where we're presenting this to different Buddhist centers, like a retreat center that may have, month-long retreats with monks that live there, and try to get them on board with obviously the teachings of the Buddha and the clarity of the compassion and the metta that the Buddha talks about and the precepts, and then tie in the environmental impact of these things. And when we tie those two together, it's often easier to get some traction. But yeah, it's definitely interesting. Like you say, it's so obvious and so clear. There are many Buddhist teachers who have these ways of rationalizing it around it, and so we could talk more about that too if you'd like. So, but yeah, that's kind of our goal. So
I want to understand why anybody would want to become a Buddhist and then violate the first precept. It doesn't make any sense to me. Become something else. If that's the basis of the religion, and Buddha has said it very clearly, why on earth would you then join this and then go out of your way to eat animals or wear animals? Andrea.
Yeah, that's an amazing question. And so our very first precept in the teachings is to not kill, and that includes all living beings. And so, there are a lot of the reasons why people who are not Buddhist aren't not vegan is the same reasons why Buddhists aren't vegan, and that's the propaganda. We're dealing with billions of dollars at this point of propaganda telling people that veganism is unhealthy. And so in some of our projects, for instance, in Thailand, we're trying to teach people that eating vegan is actually healthier than eating animals. And so we're trying to just overcome all of these objections that we're getting from the community. And that's a big one, is the health. People are afraid that they'll actually die if they stop eating animals.
I mean, let's be real. You'd have to be living under a rock to really think that. There are millions of vegans, the three of us included. There's the Game Changers. There's Forks Over Knives. You literally would have to live under a rock to actually say to yourself with complete confidence that, oh, I'm going to die if I adopt a plant-based diet. What's the real reason, Forrest, do you think, on a psychological level?
Yeah, I mean, I think, people are addicted to animal products. Like, we know this as vegans, whether you're a carnist and you're a carnivore person or a Buddhist, the same type of addictions. Psychological thinking is the underlying problem. And unfortunately, in Buddhism particularly, people say 2,500 years ago, the Buddha ate meat, the monks ate meat. And if you study deeply and look deeply, the Buddha really challenged people to not eat animal products, and even said that the 5 precepts of no killing, no stealing, no sexual misconduct, no lying, and no intoxicants were the minimum moral obligation for lay practitioners, which means just people who are average, ordinary people. They had more precepts for monks. I just want to say real quick, though, that the Buddha said he is just a man. He is not starting a religion. This is just a philosophy. It's a path that allows you to end your suffering. So you mentioned the word religion. Buddhism is considered a world religion because humans have turned it into that. But the simple teachings of the Buddha, he said, this is nothing of the sort. This is just a path to end your suffering, a path of awakening. So I just like to clarify that. So,
okay, well, we've got some comments. Ruta says, a Buddhist friend told me that they are just the followers. They don't have to be vegan, as Nichiren Daishonin was himself. Crazy. What are your thoughts on that? Because I know there's a lot of different sects of Buddhism, Andrea, and they have different beliefs.
Yeah, so it really just depends on, like you said, the sect of Buddhism. And so, for instance, in Vietnam, all of the monks there, they do take a vow to not consume animals. And you would think that the followers would follow that, but there's still the objections that they're afraid of their health. And as Forrest said, there's the addiction. And so that's really what we're trying to do here with Dharma Voices for Animals, is find out the reasons that different communities are not following the path of the Buddha. And something that is really important, I saw another comment there. They mentioned that, sorry, wait, I don't remember what that comment said.
With Sharon Shonen Buddhism, or there's various comments.
Sorry, it popped up. It'll come back to me.
Yeah.
Sorry. But Forrest, if you want to fill in from here, I'll think of it.
Was it the one about Tibet? Maybe they don't have many options in Tibet. I did see that comment.
Oh, thank you. Yes. Yeah. So there's another one that just in the teachings at certain times, when the Buddha was around, some people said that he did say you can consume animals. Some said he didn't. But you have to think about when the Buddha was alive, animal agriculture was not what it is today. And so, people were raising, animals in their backyards. And there's this path in Buddhism, or this, it kind of has to pass like a 3-point test. Here, an animal was killed for you specifically. You're not supposed to eat the animal. And so people kind of use that as a justification of, I didn't see it, I didn't hear, and I didn't suspect. But when you go to a grocery store and you buy animal flesh, they have to kill another animal to replace that product, as people say. And so the animals are being killed for us, essentially.
It seems like a lot of justification. And again, this incredible movie that you produced, that Keegan Kuhn directed, and he's a great director, called Animals and the Buddha, makes very clear that you have to do mental gymnastics to avoid the idea that Buddha is saying, do not kill animals, do not cause harm. Let's hear another clip from this film.
So the first precept, not to cause any injury to any living thing, means any living thing.
It's interesting to me because the suttas on one hand are very clear about non-harming. And when they talk about beings, it's all beings, it's sentient beings. Included in the first precept of non-harming is to not take life. So that seems fairly clear to me, that the Buddha was intending us to include in our field of metta or loving kindness all kinds of beings, from the smallest to the largest, the two-legged, the four-legged, the many-legged.
So, how do I understand that in fact there's this great film, Christspiracy goes into this, and various other films that people in the spiritual realm, again, do mental gymnastics to try to justify their behavior. Now, admittedly, none of us is perfect. None of us is living a perfect life. But what are some of these mental gymnastics, and how are you counteracting them, Forrest?
So this is great. The fact that you mentioned mental gymnastics, I just came up with a little satire thing that I shared with Andrea, kind of as just an opening. And I nicknamed it the Buddhist mental gymnastics. And there's different levels of medals. There's gold, silver, and bronze level awards for the level of mental gymnastics that I have seen. A gold medal gymnastics award would be many Buddhist teachers, and many Buddhists will take these very advanced, very complicated, hard to grasp philosophical ideas. Maybe something like emptiness. All beings are connected. Everything is connected. Therefore, when I kill, there's no such thing as death. Or a view of not attachment to views. I can't attach myself to any dogma or any idea. Therefore, I don't have to believe in any certain thing. And they'll use these very advanced philosophical ideas to negate the simple precept of not killing. And the Buddha said, all beings fear death, all beings love life, therefore one should not slay nor cause to slay. So it's very clear. So, but yeah, there are many different ways they can come about this. And Jane, if you've had a conversation with any ordinary person on the street about veganism, Buddhists have the same things. And on top of that, they use rationalizations like 2,500 years ago, the Buddha ate meat, and my teacher said I can eat meat. So it's like almost more difficult at times to have a productive conversation with a Buddhist than it is with someone who is just not even aware. They're just, oh, wait a minute, what? So it's really bizarre. But it's funny that you said mental gymnastics, because I had the same kind of like satirical approach to this conversation. So,
well, let's talk about your incredible organization, Dharma Voices for Animals. Now, you are running the U.S. projects. Forrest, and there's
Yes.
also these international projects. So let's start with Andrea. Tell us about your work in Thailand and Vietnam and wherever else you're working. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I've read that the overwhelming majority of Buddhists live in Asian countries, so that your focus is there, but you also have a focus in the United States. Tell me about this.
Yeah, absolutely. So right now we have 4 projects, as you said, in the US, Thailand, Vietnam, and Sri Lanka. And so our biggest project, we have 17 regional coordinators, is in Sri Lanka. And our regional coordinators are actually going to the Sunday schools, talking to children, talking to businesses, since it's a predominantly Buddhist country. And they're just speaking about the values that the Buddha gave us, and these practices that we're supposed to be living by, and trying to reconnect Buddhists with those practices. So last year, we saw about 120,000 people in person for these presentations, and we're continuing to grow. We're really, really happy. We have we printed the very first vegan cookbook ever in Sri Lanka, which we distribute for free to the community. We're giving them to the temple so that they can learn to cook and take these recipes home. We do cooking contests. We were helping with the animal welfare bill that unfortunately did not get passed. They have not had an updated welfare bill since 1907, and so it's a long time coming. Our next project is Thailand, and so we obviously tailor our message and our mission depending on the culture and the history of each country. And in Thailand, the monastics there, the monks, they can only consume food that's given to them by the community. They go on alms rounds, and so they take their bowl and people put in their bowl whatever they like, since they do consume animal products. And now they're given so much animal products that the health of the monks is worse than the general public. There's a health epidemic, and this issue is so bad that the government has had to intervene. They're trying to give presentations just like we do on the health of the monks, but we're going in and giving health seminars directly to the monks, directly to the community, to teach them about the detriments of consuming animal products. So our project there is led by a YouTube sensation, Coach Bank, but he also has a PhD in public health. He wrote a book that he distributes. We're actually doing a fundraiser right now. If you pay $10, you can put a book, which is a blueprint to health, into the hands of a monk. And so we're using the health aspect in Thailand, also the environmental aspect. We're starting to speak about how animal agriculture is absolutely driving the climate crisis. And, Thailand, they're being affected and impacted by this more than a lot of other places because it's so coastal. So our next project is in Vietnam, and then I'll let Forrest take over for US project. But our Vietnam project, since the monks do take a vow to not consume animals, there's no animal products in the temples there, the pagodas they call. The issue is that we're seeing is that people are not going home and continuing to eat vegan. And what they told us is they're afraid of the health risks that they assume. And a lot of people in Thailand and Vietnam, the doctors, they're not allowed to talk about veganism being healthy. It's actually really taboo. And so we're going in and working with local businesses who have amazing vegan restaurants and teaching the lay people how to cook good vegan food, because they don't think it's tasty, which we all know is not true. And I'll kick it over to Forrest for US project.
Well, yeah. And what I thought was so interesting is you're a forest ranger.
I used to be a park ranger with the National Park Service. I was the talking ranger. I would give interpretive programs. Jane, you would have loved it. If you came into the lighthouse in the Golden Gate National Recreation Area, you might have thought you were coming to hear about the lighthouse. I gave a full story about the environmental impact of animal agriculture and why the United Nations says we all need to go plant-based.
Well,
and I
guess
got to give
what,
this program
Forrest?
hundreds of times last summer. So
I've got a clip of you giving a lecture, and it's very compelling. And I want to talk about it on the other side, because Dharma Voices for Animals, as you go around to all these Buddhist temples and all these cultural centers, correct me if I'm wrong, this is essentially the information that you're giving these folks. So let's listen to one of your talks and then we'll talk about it.
this is our habitable land. And what are we doing with this habitable land? We're using 50% of the land on Earth to raise crops and graze animals for crops and for animal agriculture. This does not include land to grow crops for humans. 50% of the land we can live on, we're using it for animal agriculture. That's a problem. When we've talked about how much water goes into it, how much devastation happens, half the Earth's habitable land is used for animal agriculture. So, I've got good news though. Everybody's like, good, this is getting depressing. A dietary shift is going to save us. Can we do it is the question. And it wasn't just the United Nations. Oxford, Cambridge, Stockholm, NYU, Harvard, Princeton, Stanford, the USDA, the US EPA, everybody is saying the same thing. I got a great quote from Oxford University. Avoiding meat and dairy is the single biggest way to reduce your impact on Earth. Oxford University, respectable group. I also give this talk in the Bay Area, so I have a quote from Stanford and Cal. They did a massive study in 2022, and their results found that our best and most immediate chance to reverse this trajectory is by a dietary shift.
So there it is. And yet, it's not just the Buddhists that are not getting this message. If you look at across the board, media, they do not discuss this. It doesn't matter whether it's liberal, progressive media, conservative media, down the middle media. It's verboten to mention this at all. Why? Look at the advertisers of fast food and pharmaceuticals to a large degree. So how do we break through? You said the good news is, and then you cite all these universities. And I've seen some of those studies, but they're not getting widely reported. It's almost like spitting into the wind. And I'll put it to you, Forrest, and then we'll get Andrea.
Yeah, I agree. It's very frustrating at times to try to get through. I feel like, every time there has been massive systemic change, it's started from the ground up. Yeah. And I share that in my presentation. I was at VCOP this weekend, and Keegan Kuhn was there talking about how the media has shifted away from a lot of these things. He can't get documentaries like Cowspiracy or new environmental documentaries taken on by Netflix and Apple. So it's very discouraging to hear these things. But another speaker there gave the analogy that when change happens, sometimes it's up and down, but other times it's a loop-de-loop. And that right now we're going through the loop-de-loop where we were making some good progress and now we're going back or almost in reverse. But that what's going to happen is this reversal is going to catapult us into a massive shift. So we hope that happens. And us that are out here doing what we're doing right now and sharing this message and carrying this message is really the best thing we can do. Just help people one at a time wake up and share this information. And hopefully enough people start to get on board, So my job with the U.S. projects is to basically two things. One is to share that story. I got to do that talk at a Tibetan Buddhist center in Santa Cruz called Land of Medicine Buddha. It was great. They were really well received. But to try to share this information more and more, Buddhists will help wake up, but also to just offer what we have at Dharma Voices for Animals to anybody who is possibly interested in Buddhism, veganism, or in a vegan activist that could just need a spiritual practice. I know Andrea is on the same boat. Practicing Buddhist meditation has done wonders for my mental health. As a vegan in this dark world, some days it's overwhelming. We have a once a month animal activist sangha. It's the last Sunday of the month. You can find it on dharmavoicesforanimals.org, where we have Buddhist monk give a guided meditation. We all sit together and talk about the good things, the hard things, challenges we're going through as vegans, as Buddhists, as people who just love animals. So it's a great support. And I invited a friend of mine who's a vegan Buddhist at a sangha in Los Angeles. I texted him, and he's, I think, on right now watching it. I've been in sanghas where I'm the lone vegan, and it's hard being the lone vegan. And Dharma Voices for Animals can support those Buddhists that are out there that need a voice. And that's one of our best hopes, is that by us getting more awareness about our organization, a Buddhist may call us from Minnesota and say, hey, can you give a Zoom presentation to my sangha? They would love to hear this, and you would back me up in what I've been sharing with them with actual information and with resources. So we have resources where we could help centers transition to fully plant-based and offer dietary support and nutritional support and guidance. And we have physicians on board, and we have everything necessary to help any Buddhist center transition to be a fully plant-based, fully vegan center, which is what our goal is here in the U.S. So.
Wow, that's amazing. And so, this reminds me very much of the battle with environmentalists to try to get environmentalists to embrace a plant-based diet.
Very similar.
There has been some success. I think when you break through with one group And humans are pack animals, and we have a tendency to do what somebody else is doing. In fact, there's this great book called Change that analyzes how people change. And the way they say they change is absolutely not true. They'll tell themselves a story. I'm changing for environmental reasons, for cost reasons, saving money. No, it's because they see their neighbors doing it. They see their friends. They see people in their pack. Right. So, for example, with environmental groups, we've had some success here in Los Angeles, thanks to the Plant-Based Treaty and other organizations. West Hollywood has gone plant-based by default. Hollywood Climate Summit, their events are vegan. Badass Green Awards, run by California Enviro Voters, their events are vegan. So as those break through and create a template, and then other groups go, oh, well, they did it, maybe we should. Is that the same kind of thing that you're seeing in the Buddhist community, Andrea?
I think it can be. I think that the work that we're doing is leading us there. I think, the root of the issue with environmentalists not being vegan or other social justice movements maybe not being so prone to other social justice movements is that there's not really an understanding of the intersectionalism between all forms of suffering. And in Buddhism, we have what's called engaged Buddhism. A lot of people think Buddhism is about being a pacifist. That's not true. We are told to bear witness to injustice and to speak about it. And so I think, with Buddhism and also with the animal rights community, we have this really, really amazing opportunity to make veganism the moral baseline for all social justice movements. And so I know there's a lot of issues within the community about this, and I don't want to get too into it because it's a really hot topic, but it's just...
What do you mean by that? I'm gonna be provocative.
Just some people may not see the connection between what our mission is with the animals to animal liberation and other suffering that we're seeing in human rights today, in the past. We can talk about like Black Lives Matter, about, women's issues, LGBT struggles. And so I personally think that if the vegan movement, the animal rights movement, and Buddhists who preach about non-harming, if we make veganism the baseline for all social justice movements, we're going to see radical change and pretty rapid change in the world. If we can start calling out these hypocrisies of you care about the environment, you care about Black people, you care about all these things that you should care about, Hispanics, Indigenous Americans like myself, but why are you contributing to the harm of an innocent being when we have the option to not?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I've spoken at feminist events where I was actually scolded because I was accused of comparing women to animals. I said, well, first of all, we've so demonized animals that to compare these innocent, beautiful beings to a human is considered an insult. Right. And it's, there's a phrase for it now, speciesism, right? Where we feel like we're so morally superior that even to give any consideration to these beings is somehow infantile, besides the point. But the basis of all evil, and I didn't make this up, it's a famous quote, I don't remember who, but the basis of all evil is that some suffering doesn't count. When are we going to learn this lesson? There are so many parallels between the animal rights movement and other social justice movements that were also deemed irrelevant, right, deemed idiotic, infantile. I mean, you could talk about the women's movement. You could talk about the LGBTQ movement. Some of the same attitudes were applied to those social justice movements. And yet it seems the intelligentsia is not so intelligent. They don't get it. Forrest.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I think, a couple thoughts. One thing that popped into my head and something I try to do, this is just on the vegan front, is to not use the word factory farming. So much of where I used to live in Marin County, and there are all these local farms in West Marin where the cows overlook the ocean, and people would say, oh, I don't support factory farming. I did street activism with Anonymous for the Voiceless, and people would walk by and say, that's horrible factory farming. That's why I buy my cows from West Marin. So we have to talk about animal farming. All animals suffer, whether they're on a nice farm or a factory farm. They all are sent to slaughter. They all have a horrible footprint, And then the other thought I was having was, oh my goodness, we were talking about everything intersecting.
Well, I want to jump in on that because I've actually just been in Northern California where an organization called Direct Action Everywhere held a march in Petaluma and said, that's considered like the egg basket of the world at one point. And they said, everybody's telling themselves this fairy tale that,
Yes.
oh, look at, there's a couple of backyard chickens that they keep pointing to, but 99.9% of all animals are raised in factory farms.
Right.
Yes.
So yes, we've all driven by and seen those cows grazing, but those are a tiny, minuscule fraction. People, even if they say they're buying that so-called humane meat and there's no such thing, they're actually not.
Yes.
They're telling themselves,
Absolutely.
they're looking at that and saying, oh, that's what I'm buying, but they're not buying that. It's not what you get in stores. 99.999% of all animal products are from factory farms.
Yes.
So I think it's a nuanced argument. We have to tell people that, we have to give them that information too.
Absolutely.
The scattering of animals that you see do not represent the vast majority of animals are hidden behind closed doors. And indeed, ag-gag laws and other laws try to criminalize even showing those animals.
Yes. Yeah, but go ahead,
Okay.
Andrea.
Sure. No, just to touch on that, because I actually found Buddhism through my animal rights practice. I did investigations in farms and slaughterhouses in the United States, in Spain, and in Mexico. I've seen hundreds of these facilities, and everyone I saw, the suffering was so immense that it caused a severe case of panic disorder. It was so bad. My now husband had to drive me to the emergency room multiple days a week just to sit in the parking lot because I was convinced I was going to die. And that's what happens when you see the suffering that happens in standard farms. We're not talking just factory. We're talking family farms that people think are more just and have different practices, which we know that they don't. And so I found meditation to help with the panic disorder, and it did. And that led me to Buddhism. And now in 2022, I started to learn about the teachings of the Buddha. And every single thing that I learned was not in alignment with the things that I saw in any farm, in any slaughterhouse. You cannot deny that level of suffering, of pain, of torment, of just, it was horrendous. It was felt like I was like witnessing hell in real life for people who believe in hell. And so I think a lot of Buddhists, perhaps they don't know that because they haven't seen the images. They haven't seen the videos.
Honestly, I'm not going to give them a pass. You go on any social media for 5 seconds and you will see these images. They're not hidden anymore. They're everywhere. And, people see what they want to see. I understand that you're coming from this kind perspective of assuming the best of intentions, but I have to say, you literally, once again, have to be living under a rock not to know what's going on. And I go back to the whole concept of the pack. And if you think about, sometimes one individual will shatter the pack. I mean, if you look back in history, there are those people who, we can all name them, they take one bold action and they shatter the pack. Right. That's what I think we need to do. We need to get these people who are leaders like yourself and get them to say, you know what? I was wrong. I'm going to do it differently. Are you seeing that kind of change, Forrest, as you go through these Buddhist communities in the United States? First of all, how many are we talking about? And what kind of change are you seeing in the pack?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I've been with DVA, Dharma Voices for Animals, for 5 months. So we're just now rolling out the Sustainable Sangha project. And I've called centers, and it's a uphill battle. There's not a whole lot of people that are interested over the phone. We have some centers that are moving in that direction, but we have our work cut out for us, which is one of the reasons why we want to, hey, anybody that's on here that can check us out and see what we do. We are a nonprofit. We operate through fundraising. So anyone that can help our cause and donate to our cause, you are literally going to help us help animals. And as Andrea already shared about what's happening globally, I can share my own personal experience as a vegan with my family. For example, for 17 years, I've been trying to get my family on board, and everybody has this experience. They say, I can't watch those videos. Yeah. And I don't support that, because when I go shopping at the grocery store, I buy cage-free, humane, all of these marketing myths that people are sold. So I agree, Jane, it's a nuanced argument. But the fact is, people are being sold a lie every time they go shopping that this animal was treated well. And we know it wasn't. We know it's a lie, but they're being sold that with the packaging at the grocery store. So that's why I say it doesn't matter if the animal was wherever it was raised, it still went to slaughter. it still has a large environmental footprint and it's suffered. So I think it's important to talk about that. And the thing with veganism, we were talking about intersection. This is a passive decision. If you're against war, I'm against war. I vote against war, but I can't really stop wars personally. However, when I go grocery shopping, I cannot support violence, which is in essence not supporting war. This is a passive decision from buying an animal-based product to a plant-based product. It's so easy. Every taste and texture and flavor is available at the grocery store in a vegan version, and it is a passive decision. I can stand against everything in the world, but I can make an actual difference every day, 3 times a day when I eat. And we all know these arguments, but it's important to talk about these things, that we can make a massive difference every day. I think I'll share this. Earthling Ed said, saying that I can't support veganism because there's a war in Syria is like saying I can't help homeless people in my neighborhood because there's a war in Syria. Like, right. We can still do more than one thing at once. And us vegans, we believe in nonviolence and support that in every way possible, especially with what's on our plate. So
yeah, yes, go ahead.
Just to add to that, Buddhism is about opening your eyes to suffering. The Buddha was very sheltered, the original Buddha. And so he went on to find suffering in the world. He wanted to witness people being sick, people being dying. And so we actually have a project on our page called the Bodhi Project, where we're inviting Buddhists to open their eyes to suffering. And we list several key standard practices in many industries, animal agriculture, animal testing, and it invites the Buddhists to go and actually unblur an image, because that's essentially the path of Buddhism. You have to open your eyes to it. You have to let it in, and then you take action to end that.
Wow. We've got so many comments here. First of all, somebody wanted to know, Andrea, if you were an undercover investigator.
I don't like that term because I did it on my own. I became vegan in 2016. I found DXC and the Save Movement in Arizona, started a chapter in Mexico when I lived there in 2017. And then I wanted to see for myself what was happening in these farms. I had no money. I bought a camera from the pawn shop and I just started going into places. And I can say this now because the statute of limitations is over. But I went into so many places on my own and just released it on my own social media. These videos, the truth about what happens to animals that I've taken have amassed millions of views. And I'm so grateful because you constantly get people saying, not the animals I buy, not from the stores I purchase at, not in my country. But we know with investigators all over the world, it is in your country. It is the products that you buy. And so the more images that there are of the truth, the more that we can really, really tear down this false notion.
Absolutely. Somebody said, please show the link. It's very simple, Dharma Voices for Animals. But I have a question for you. What's Dharma mean? I don't understand. That's why I said Voices for Animals, Dharma Voices. Yeah. What is Dharma?
The Buddha taught the Dharma is what it was called. And he basically just said he teaches the truth. He teaches a path to the end of suffering. And Dharma is what his teachings are referred to as. So DHARMA, Dharma. Yeah, that's the.
Wow. So I would like to ask you all, what were your biggest success stories so far with Buddhists? Let's start with you, Andrea.
Yeah, so the biggest one, so DVA, just for a little background, started in 2011. A group of friends from California were just as shocked as we all were to learn that not all Buddhists were vegan. And so they actually worked with Spirit Rock. It's a really big center here in the United States to help over time reduce the amount of animals they're consuming. We also have a new project that we started in Thailand called the Mindful Meals Program. And essentially temples are signing on to serve vegan food for 1 day a week for an entire year, which it sounds like a small shift, but it's a massive shift if you do the numbers. And so we have 7 temples signed up for our program. 2 of them are renewals for last year. And we're really excited because there is a specific temple who decided on their own accord that they want to do 2 days instead of 1. And they told us they want to slowly start increasing until it's a fully vegan center. And so with programs like this, with contributions from the public, we're allowed to do this work and make change. We're changing thousands of years of cultural and historical norms. So we're really, really proud of that.
One of the things that has come up recently is plant-based by default. And again, West Hollywood, which is one of the most progressive cities in the world, certainly in the United States, it's always the first to do something, whether it's banning fur. They've adopted plant-based by default, which is kind of I think a brilliant concept for Buddhist temples, because it's saying, hey, if you really want to eat animals, you're going to have to ask for it. And then you're in the group where you're like proactively asking for something that is contrary to the spiritual doctrine. Would you consider, and it's also could be easier for them to adopt. In other words, it's not asking them to do something 100%. It's more like how you lay it out. Do you think that might be a good strategy, Forrest?
Yeah, that's definitely one way to look at it. And we're working with where we want to work with centers and give them a different recognition levels for if they're switching to partially plant-based or one meal a day or 1 day a week. I mean, these are, I've never been a reductarian. I'm more of an abolitionist approach, but if we can get centers to slowly adopt, the goal is to switch them to plant-based. Now, you asked Andrea about successes. I want to throw this challenge out on Unchained TV. What an opportunity. Everything we've shared today, we've talked about the environmental impact. We've talked about the ethical impact. To all the Buddhists who could be listening, who may hear this, Dharma Voices for Animals, we want to work with you. We want you to become a plant-based Buddhist center. Why not? Why not be the first one? Why not make the commitment? If there's anyone out there that's listening, Jane's asked us what kind of success we've had in the U.S. It is sad to say, not much. We have work cut out for us. We've had individual success. We want a big center to get on board and support this wherever they could be. Maybe this is the platform that's going to get that out there for us. We would love that to happen. And I'm throwing the challenge out to all Buddhist centers in the United States. Let's do this. Get on board with DVA and let's follow these principles. Let's take a stand about the environmental destruction that's happening in 2025. The Buddha was here 2,500 years ago. We cannot lean back and say what they did 2,500 years ago can set a precedent for us today when we know what we know. Like Jane just said, you have to be living under a rock to not understand the ethical implications and the environmental destruction that's happening. So that's the challenge. I'm throwing it out here on Unchained TV. Let's go, Buddhists. Come on.
I am super excited that you have made this challenge on Unchained TV. We're going to make this into a social media post. We're going to spread it out there, and we will do a story. I promise you. We'll get on a plane and go to whatever Buddhist center makes this choice to go plant-based, to go cruelty-free, to really truly adhere to the spirit of Buddhism, and we will do a mini doc. I'll throw that in there on the entire process. So there you go. This is very exciting. What would you say to encourage, Andrea?
Yeah, that just to mirror what Forrest said. I mean, you have to be ready to be a change maker. A lot of centers in the United States talk about eco-dharma, which is protecting the environment with the teachings of the Buddha. And just like with environmentalism, animal agriculture is greatly ignored. And we have resources. The organization A Well-Fed World has provided a really nice grant that we can turn around and give to centers so they can test items, plant-based products. And a big concern that centers have in the United States is they think people won't support them anymore if they take away the animal products. But again, we're offering so many seminars. Forrest can talk about the environment. Our board treasurer, Dr. Alan Kornberg, he's a vegan, been a pediatrician from all of his life. He can talk about the health aspect. And so we just really want people to understand all we want to do is help align our actions, with our values. And it's as simple as contacting DVA and seeing what we can do for you.
Well, Tina Walker says, this is exciting. We're making history. Yes, we're making history right here on Unchained TV. Woohoo! Let's do it. Alexandra says, DVA does incredible work. Please consider donating so they can continue to help animals. Absolutely. Let me put up the website. You just go there, hit the donate button, and you can be a part of this. And I'm sure it's the same as it is with Unchained TV. You can become a monthly donor. I think that this is an overall problem with spirituality. It's not just Buddhists. You may remember famously Genesis Butler, one of the youngest TEDx speakers ever, worked with Gen V to offer to the previous Pope $1 million to his favorite charity if he would go vegan for Lent, and he declined and actually decided to give up gossip instead. May you rest in peace, Pontiff. But really, really, it's shocking to me how people who, I understand the Dalai Lama is not vegan. I mean, what's going on here? I don't get it. It reminds me of, famous people who are beating their chests for freedom for all individuals, but they were also involved with the slavery industry. I mean, there's this intense disconnect. And again, we've so demonized animals that to even make that connection, some people find offensive. I certainly do not mean that in an offensive way, any more than what I'd say I'm a woman. And the idea of feminism was denigrated and dismissed. Women have only had the right to vote in America for about 100 years, a little over 100 years. Yeah. So we go back, and somebody said, if you want to know how you were going to respond to all these injustices in the past, don't look at the past injustices. Look at the current injustice right now to animals and ask yourself, what am I doing about it? Because in order to fight injustice, you have to go into the discomfort zone. You have to break away from the pack. You mentioned your family. Well, I'm lucky to have quite a few vegans in my family. My nephew's vegan. His older daughter's vegan. I have a cousin by birth, by marriage, who is vegan, but we have a lot of what I would call pre-vegans as well. So, we're all fighting to change the pack. And it's everywhere. The battle that you are engaged in the Buddhist community is reflected in the environmental community, in the feminist community, in all of these communities. And everybody's trying to come up with the secret sauce. How do we get people to change? And really, if you read this book, Change, it says you have to change the pack. That no matter what people say, that why they do something differently, they do it because their pack is doing it. So where leadership comes in is the leader of the pack, top dog, as they say in Australia, makes a change, and then others follow. What are your thoughts on that, Forrest?
Yeah, I was just thinking, I became vegan overnight as a result of attending Reverend Michael Bernard Beckwith. Was attending his spiritual group in Los Angeles called Agape, and he's vegan, and he would talk about eating the light. And at the same time, I had a friend who was vegan, who was a hardcore animal rights activist, who called me a phony environmentalist in 2007 because I was working for a solar energy company, but I was eating a lot of chicken. And then I had a little doggy, and that was my pack, I guess. You talk about it. I came home, told my wife I'm going to be vegan, and she's like, "What are you talking about?" I grew up in Texas and used to go hunting and worked in a barbecue house, and that just completely switched for me somehow. And I woke up to the suffering of animals. So yeah, the pack needs to change, but I believe individuals can wake up. And there's a great story when the Buddha found his enlightenment. He was in such bliss, and he knew how hard he had worked for it. It took him years of practice to find enlightenment. And he said, I'm just going to sit here in peace. And then he started remembering all the suffering. And he said, there are many humans who are like a lotus flower that's stuck under the mud. And there's some humans who are just above the mud, and they're just starting to wake up. And then there's other humans who are fully awakened out of the mud, and they're there and they're receptive. I believe anybody that's on this call today is that lotus. And I share that when I get to give my talks in Buddhist centers. Like, if you're here, you have awakened. And our goal as Buddhists is to practice this type of love that is radiance. And we give off a bright energy of metta is what we call it. And it's a radiation of beautiful, beautiful warmth. The Buddha shine this, and that warmth and that radiance can really change people. I was a personal trainer for years. I had clients become vegan, not because I nagged them, but because I radiated happy vegan energy, And I think that's something we all can work on as vegans. And that's one of the reasons why I talk about Buddhism helping me so much, because I'm very sensitive to this world, and that's a great thing. But other days, the darkness of this world weighs me down, and I need this meditation practice to continue to shine this light of love for all beings, even those that are doing harm. My first meditation teacher said, if you send these people anger, if you send them hatred, you're literally giving them fuel for their fire. Forrest, you need to send them love. And I'm like, I can't love these people, but that's the solution, is to send love out to all beings. And in doing so, the vibration changes on the planet, and we can do that. You know, that's our mission here. So
That's a very good reminder, because sometimes I get irritated. Now, Tom says, when in Chicago, visit our center, Chicago Karma Thieves Gum. I'm not saying it right. Anyway, take a note of this, because if you get one, maybe this one, he says that they try to do vegetarianism. So if you get that one, I love Chicago.
We have a DVA chapter starting in Chicago
to feature them.
Yeah, I think we have a DVA chapter potentially starting in Chicago, and Andrea is going to be there for a meeting before long. So, hey, let's do this.
Yeah, because again, there's a challenge from Dharma Voices for Animals here on Unchained TV. Repeat it one more time so we can be sure of exactly what the offer is.
Okay, here is the challenge to the Buddhist centers of the U.S. Let's make a change. You've heard the case we've stated here today from the environmental and the ethical standpoint. Why is your center not getting on board with this? And the challenge from Dharma Voices for Animals and to all the Buddhists is, let's make this change happen together. We have all the resources we need. I want to challenge Dharma centers in the United States to make this change. The challenge has been thrown down on Unchained TV, and I hope we can come together and work as a team to really make an impact for all beings, for the animals, for the humans, and for the earth, and for the benefit of our own health, for the health of the animals and of the earth. Let's make a change. The challenge is, let's make plant-based Dharma centers in the United States the baseline.
Yes.
Woo! I love it. I want to thank both of you. You are my heroes. I love your work. I'm urging everybody, donate to Dharma Voices for Animals. And just a personal note, a cousin of yours, Jamie Logan, featured all over Unchained TV. And somebody said they wanted to watch Animals in the Buddha. It is streaming on Unchained TV. We're the world's only free vegan animal rights streaming television network. Just go to unchained.tv or get it on your TV or on any phone. So I want to thank you both for joining us. And again, you can watch this podcast and Animals and the Buddha and all sorts of vegan animal rights content on Unchained.
So it's a vegan Netflix. Okay, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard.
I love Unchained TV.
Unchained TV. Your life will change. It's just that easy.
Unchained TV has all sorts of content for everybody.
Unchained TV changed my life.
Unchained TV is crushing it.
I love Unchained TV.
Unchained TV is my go-to.
Unchained TV. Who knew?
Unchained.